Hello and welcome to part 3 of a 3-part series of Business Beat with me, Odette, and we're talking transformation, a very important topic in South Africa. And if you're an entrepreneur, it's so important for you to understand this because you need to know when you pitch to business how they actually look at your business in the tender documents that you submit. You also need to understand what the purpose of transformation is, and if you're starting a business, how to structure your business in terms of being transformed. You need to tune into this conversation with Deon and I. Deon, welcome back to Business Beat.
Morning, Odette.
Thank you so much for your time. I want to know from you, are companies specifically, and I want to talk to you about when we talk about black companies, right? What is defined as black owned in law or in BEE, right? Are they getting their fair share of the pie when they're trying to get business and grow their businesses here in South Africa?
It's an interesting and actually quite a multifaceted question that you just asked me, because ownership is not who owns the business and it's simple. There are 5 shares and I owe 4 of them and you have 1, and that's simple. What has happened is, because of private equity involvement in international companies, financiers, the agenda of broad-based involvement, personnel schemes, staff incentive schemes, there's been in the codes many different versions of what would qualify for recognition in terms of black ownership.
You use that word schemes a lot. Sounds like a lot of scheming to me.
Yes. Unfortunately, when you look at the transformation agenda and you look at what businesses are doing, not everybody does it the way it should be doing. Therefore,
let's call a spade a spade. Some businesses use fronting.
Yes,
right.
that is absolutely the case, or they go borderline against the limits.
Okay.
And unfortunately, transformation has now got to the point where we are with tax. In other words, you've got to be very specific. This is what you're supposed to do. And if you do this, you comply. And if you don't comply. These are the rules, comply.
Okay.
In transformation, that is where we are now getting, because government's not saying to companies out there, we want you to comply. We're just saying, we want you to comply.
The end.
And then they came up with a set of rules. Now, companies will always look at easier ways to comply. Fortunately, as well, from my observation, I don't really often talk to them in the sense that they don't look for help from people that offer legitimate strategic services. They want to hide in the darkness. And it's not that prevalent, although it is there. So if you want to hear a horror story, is where a black executive running a company, being in business for 10 years, loses a tender because somebody else has fabricated some form of scam that gives him more points. It's not a common theme, but it does happen.
It happens, yeah.
And what has happened when you say what is black ownership and when does it qualify, so we have a set of rules. And those rules says this qualifies in this way, this qualifies in that way. If you have an employment staff scheme, it's got to be a legitimate scheme. They have to be entitled to information. They have to be part of the decision making, so that you have real ownership and not sort of like look like ownership.
Yeah.
And then you have, on the other end of the spectrum, black people starting businesses. Now, when a black person starts a company and they're successful and they look for funding, they will go for a financier, somebody to invest in their business. And that might dilute their black shareholding. So they end up at a 51%, the magical 51% black ownership. So when you look at the biggest diversity of schemes, scams, honest intent and devious behavior, you look around the 51% mark.
So
because
51% black owned, black being African black, colored people, Indian people.
Yes,
yes,
as it qualifies in terms of the definition of the
terms of
Constitution.
Right.
So not African as in non-South African, but
yes,
South African.
African. We're talking about in the South African line. Okay.
Yeah.
So 51%, then you are black owned.
Yes.
How is transformation, the codes, the changes to regulations such as the preferential procurement regulations, the councils, their effectiveness or lack thereof, how is this impacting unemployment? Is it contributing to unemployment? Is it enabling job creation? What are your 3 closing comments about transformation and unemployment, and how that can possibly assist the crisis
Okay, so transformation is about carving up the cake. Who gets what piece of it, and is it fair, and do I have enough of a slice, and what can I do to get more?
Right.
Okay, unemployment is about the size of the cake. There's not enough cake. We have a 30% plus unemployment. We have an impossible unemployment under African youth. Impossible numbers. Like if you wake up in South Africa and you're between the ages of 15 and 24 and you're looking for a job, you have maybe 1 chance in 5 of having a decent job to go to every morning. That is not a problem. That is not a challenge. That is a crisis. And transformation is not going to change that. Because if we say, for starters, that all of the jobs held by whites will now be moved to blacks, we still have a 30% unemployment, and it's not going to change. It's going to change the lives of those that benefit, but it's not going to have a fundamental change on the cake.
Yes, I was just going to say, it's not going to change the fundamentals.
Cake's the same.
Yes.
So the whole agenda in transformation around sharing the cake is critically important. But the unemployment problem is about the size of the cake. And the transformation agenda doesn't grow the cake. There are people that'll tell you that it shrinks the cake. There are people that'll tell you that it actually makes the cake more expensive, and all sorts of other analogies. But the fundamental underlying principle is it doesn't change the size of the cake. And we have a cake size problem. We don't have a cake slice problem. We have a cake slice problem as well. But if we double the cake and everybody has a job, if you live in a village and you have a job and you earn a decent income and you can afford to send your child to university to have a better life, then she will in the next generation have a better life. If you're unemployed in your village and you have to worry about where your next meal is going to come from, how is she going to have a better life? That's what transformation does make happen. Because now there's a focus on investing in those sectors where transformation really will make a big difference. And the stories are fantastic when you get into that.
I'm sure. We've put in place BEE. Some got wealthy. Some didn't. The rules were changed. We created triple BEE, broad-based black economic empowerment. The gap between the haves and the have-nots got wider. My final question to you is there ever going to be a point where the rules as they've been put in place and the codes as they are reviewed and reviewed and reviewed and reviewed will no longer be necessary, where we will actually truly be South African in our economy and transformed?
I'm going to answer that question with a question. So we all know that speed kills. We all know that traffic rules are there for a reason. We all know that in certain conditions you have to slow down. Everybody that has a license understand that. So we should take speed limits away. People will know what speed to drive. Take the fines away, take all the regulations about what you have to do to lose your license, take it away, and people will behave. No, they won't. Which means that the regulation framework, assuming that it's done properly, assuming that it's tweaked and meets the requirements, assuming that it pushes the right agenda, because people will then comply with it and carry on. I mean, we have many customers that have been level 1 for the last 5 years. And every year it's a part of their strategy. They look at their remuneration, they look at their BEE, they look at their procurement policies, they look at new clients, new opportunities. It's part of life. Changing it will then regress back to where that doesn't matter. And that is within itself. However, what the procurement regulations done now is said, okay, well, let's just cut that off completely for the time being and focus on this only. That's not integration, that's polarization again.
I guess what we're saying is we've got a lot of work to do, South Africa. Deon, thank you so much for the education over the last 3 episodes. We truly appreciate your inputs.
Thank you.
Well, South Africa, we have work to do. Until next time.